Welcome back to another edition of the True Crime Show, featuring the most shocking killers in true crime history and the authors that have written about them. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Alan R. Warren, who is the host of the popular true crime history radio show House of Mystery, which is part of the NBC News Talk Radio network. Now, Alan received his master's degree in music from the University of Washington in Seattle, a Bachelor of Arts in Criminology from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and a Recording and Sound Engineering diploma. Now, Alan has written a number of best-selling true crime books, and he joins me today to discuss his latest book, Doomsday Cults, The Devil's Hostages. Alan R. Warren, welcome to the show.
Wow, it's my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, it's always great to have guests on that I've got an interest to myself as well, and you definitely have with some of the books that you've written. I mean, I was just reading your intro there as well, and you've got a degree in criminology. Was that right?
Well, yeah, I do. My master's is in music. I have a doctorate given to me for religious studies and diploma, actually, in criminology.
And obviously you've got a degree as well in music technology, is that
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, music.
Okay. And how, I mean, why was that? Why was that music technology there with the criminology?
I think with me, I came from, I was an autistic kid. I still am autistic. And so when I was young, I didn't have a good speaking ability, but I loved radio and music. And I think music is what pulled me out. It was kind of the stepping stone to get out.
Right, I've got you. Okay. So first of all, Alan, just tell us, why do you write books on true crime? What was the passion behind that?
I think for me, always listening to crime shows as a kid on the radio, and that got me into radio and crime. And I'm not as interested in the actual gory details of the murders as I am in the justice system and how it operates. And that's in several countries, not just in Canada, US, or England. I'm interested in that totally.
And how many books have you actually written on true crime that have been published?
16 now, I believe, published.
Wow, okay. So your first kind of paid job in this field was, I believe, the True Case Files magazine?
Yeah, that was the very first one, yeah. That's when I started doing articles. And Serial Killer magazine as well. I did 3 articles for them, I think.
And you've also got your radio show as well. Just tell us about that.
It's syndicated now on the NBC News Talk Radio in Western U.S. and Canada. So out of Seattle, but we go right down to L.A. and over to Salt Lake City.
Okay, wow, wonderful. Okay, well, we'll link your books and your talk show up in the description below. Now, am I right to say that you're more than an armchair researcher? You actually go out there in the field, you have done, met family victims as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very important to go firsthand. There's nothing like being at the place as well. And to get a better picture of what went on during the crime and how it affected the people in the neighborhood, you have to be there and you have to talk to them. Otherwise, you're just not going to get a good feel for it.
Well, no, and there is a lot of armchair researchers, because I've been in the field of alternative spirituality, metaphysics for a long time, and of course, there's a lot of debunking that goes on in this field as well just recently, right, which we'll get into just a little bit, which ties into your work. But I found that unless you go out in the field yourself, you just don't, you miss things, don't you? There's a lot that's missed out.
There's a lot of things, and you're not connecting with the people that are involved. You have to go with your own gut instinct when you meet people and when you're doing work and when you're researching. And you can't get that secondhand. You can't get that from an article in the newspaper or somewhere on the internet. I mean, it's not the same.
No, absolutely not. And I think this career for you, am I right to say it started in your 40s?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, but I came out late. You got to remember that I didn't learn to ride a bike till I was 17. Uh, so things are much further behind for me than they are for someone, except for now I'm close to 60. I wish I was 30 because I feel I have a lot to accomplish in a short time because the gas tank is more than half empty, right?
Well,
So
there's so much for you to choose from. There must be so much choice out there of books that you could do in this field. I mean,
there is.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your?
I've got
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got 6 or 7 going at a time, always. I always have. And when I first got a first publishing deal, that was kind of a surprise because I had a lot ready to go. And they were a little bit surprised, and a lot of people were as well. But it's not like I haven't been writing, it's just I haven't been published. I guess that's the way to say it.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, you've published some amazing books. I've said that already. And I hope to get you back on just to talk about some of them because the book we're going to talk about today is obviously Doomsday Cults, The Devil's Hostages. And we're going to go through that in depth in the 50 minutes that we've got together. But yeah, I can, I mean, look, when I watch Netflix nowadays, there's just so much on there, as you know, and Amazon as well, and many other platforms, right?
Yeah.
But there's a fascination with this. And when I have done my own research as well personally into the Making a Murder and the Avery case, and knowing someone that knows someone that was on that task force, that there was another side to the story completely.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was one that was not covered very well. Um, I can't blame anybody, but I've actually met all of them, talked to all of them, had Ken Kratz on the show a couple of times. Of course, the prosecutor that nobody liked, and I covered that quite extensively. But it's not surprising to me because when you've been out researching in this field, you realize that's how it is. And if anything, making a murderer kind of gives you an example of why I want to write the crime books I do. Because I don't just go over the crime, I'm going over the effects on everybody. And that kind of showed it, just not completely, but it showed kind of what I like to do in a book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought the Staircase Killer, I thought that sort of did show both sides a bit better, a bit more balanced.
Hmm.
But like you say, you've interviewed some of the people on the Avery. What's your take on it then? I mean, it's such a complex case, isn't it?
Yeah. The thing is, anytime you're dealing with crime, the problem is we get our emotions and our feelings involved. And that kind of sways us. So you go in, Ken Kratz, he's not a very nice guy. So you don't like him. You don't want to like him. He does bad things, but yet you can't let it affect the job that he did. Um, so I kind of look at it. I sort of think, in my opinion, after everything, I kind of feel I'm on the fence, but I think Avery was probably involved in the murder of Teresa Halbach. And I kind of leave it at that. But maybe not. That's a really unsolved case for me.
Yeah, and for some of these docu-series, which have become quite hot, really, haven't they? And there's so many, and they're done so well nowadays on such a different type of budget to what they were years ago, because these different platforms have come along and just totally reshaped the way that we consume our media, right? Which
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
good thing, I think, right? But sometimes, where's the victim in all this? Where's that poor victim that lost their life?
exactly. And that's sort of what needs to be covered in these crime books and documentaries, and that's what's missing. And so hopefully I do that well enough with what I do. Um, it's very important to cover that, and it's also very important to cover why things happen. Um, People miss out so much, and it's good and it's bad. The documentaries we see are good, but then I'm kind of worried that the public in general jumps on. I mean, if you look at the hate mail people got over that, and it's just not right. I'm not happy with that.
Well, there must be a reason sometimes why the Innocent Project doesn't cover certain cases because they know that there's much more to it than meets the eye, and there is someone that's in is probably guilty for it, but I'm not. Should we say no more right now? Maybe, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's one of those. Yeah. I just, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with any true crime books that you've done, have you ever sort of asked that question? Am I giving publicity to someone who doesn't deserve it? So, for example, in the case of Avery, let's just use that because we're talking about it, right? The prosecution never wanted to come on to that docuseries. Did they do that? Most times, the detectives do that as well. Because you know what? They didn't want to give him any more publicity than he had or deserved.
I think it's always different. In that particular case, I think the prosecution was under the gun because of the charges against them from previously doing it. So I think there was a financial, and before the documentary, it was not that popular. I remember interviewing the prosecutor that took over, and he even wrote a book about it and how nobody cared. It was one of those that it didn't sell, it was doing nothing. And then once it got on Netflix, it became, everybody from Nancy Grace was talking about it. And
Yeah.
once she talks about it, look out.
But then, absolutely. But I'm doing a murder docu-series right now in the UFO community, and I filmed it last year. And that question keeps coming in my head when I'm putting this out. I'm like, I'm giving the platform to the guy really that did this murder, and the other participant in the murder won't be part of it because obviously he's as guilty as anything, right? But is giving a platform to these people. It's that age-old question, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like you want to tell the story, but how do you not tell it without giving the platform to someone?
I think that you can't. You've just if you have to realize when you're writing or doing a show like a docuseries, why are you doing it? That's the question. So what is it that you want people to walk away with at the end of it? What do you want them to feel? So if you're just displaying the evidence you have and what you know, that's fine. Just make sure you're balanced. Make sure that you do talk about the victim. You talk about what was missing out of their life, what's left of their family, and what did the justice system do? Did it work? That's the big question. I want people to think about that when they finish my books. Did it come out correctly? Did it finish? Did the justice system work the way we wanted it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to remind myself, it is entertainment as well. There is that aspect of it, done kindly towards the victims as well, obviously, because maybe if the victims could speak, they would want their story told.
It could be, yeah. And quite often the families that I've met do want to. In fact, some of the books, like one of them I'm working on now, it was just a terrible murder case, and so when I reached out to the family, it was kind of like the different members. It was like, well, do you want a book? Do you want to talk about it or not? And because so many did, I jumped on it. Otherwise, no.
Well, let me ask you this question as well. I was going to say this to the end, but what is the most important message in this book we're about to talk about, and also your work in general for what you do?
Oh, important message. I want people, again, I want them to look at, sure, here's the story I'm telling, here's what happened, here are the people involved, and here's the details. But what did we do as a society with this crime or this cult or this event that happened? So what did we actually do? How did we handle that? And that includes the justice system, it includes media, it includes all of us. What are we happy with the way things are turning out? And I think that's the most important.
Absolutely.
For me.
So what led you to write this particular book then, Doomsday Cults? What was the pull there?
I was producing a show that was dealing more in religion and conspiracy and a lot of paranormal as well. I was producing for someone that was doing it. And I used to get really upset with the way programs take these cults, these religions, the paranormal. I mean, you've been in that business, and can you look at what happened with that. I mean, if you think years ago when Most Haunted in the UK with Karen and Yvette Fielding was kind of like the only show on, and there was very limited exposure to what it came into, and the rules that come with the television programs on that subject, and it was driving me nuts. It was driving me nuts because you can have a really good concept. You could be really out there to learn something about any of these subjects by being involved, and all of a sudden, over in the UK, you got Really TV. It's just you got all these programs that are nothing but that category, and they all have the same rules. They all have the same angle. They all have the same look. And I was just going to say, then you're losing the whole idea of, if you believe in ghosts and afterlife and mediums, and you want to get into that, then get into it, but do it honestly and do it a raw sort of picture or show. You get in there and really do it, not all of the stuff that comes with it now.
A lot of talk. Okay, so there's been an explosion in true crime. Like, definitely. Look at the amount of podcasts. Same thing with the paranormal and esoteric and metaphysical and alternative and conspiracy. Massive, massive explosion of content. And so many. Anyone could be a host nowadays. You don't need to go to university to study to be a radio broadcaster, right? And you can monetize it as well, right? It's so different, right? But there's a lot of people in my game, I feel, that just massage the guests and, allow them to talk, which is fine. And I probably was guilty of this at one point, 100%, and just, believe or just, give them that emphasis to say, well, whatever you're saying must be true and I won't question you on it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, of course I believe that the soul continues. But to say what it is or to define it, I have no idea. I have many guests on that have near-death experiences, past life regressionists, all sorts. Even I'm just doing a series on channeling. But with discernment, yeah,
Right. Right.
I mean, we want to be told what to think, what to do, what to say, and we, like someone else that came on my show said to me, we don't want to take responsibility for it, and that's still going on right now as we get into the cult subject. So, just very quickly, and I want to get back into my field because there's a reason why. But how would you define a cult?
I don't anymore. When someone asked me that, I used to say, well, it's a small group that has some sort of religious or background in that sort of way, and I can't anymore, because you get to what's the difference between a religion and a cult, and you get all these questions. The idea in the beginning part of the book, I was talking about how Jesus Christ as we know it and Christianity started, it was considered a cult at the time. And if it wasn't for the emperor of Rome converting and changing it and making it a religion, where would it be? And I'm not saying that to put it down, but what I'm saying is, what would we do with a character like Jesus Christ today if we had this guy walking around saying he can heal people, he's God's son, and preached whatever the preachings were. So you get out there. So you have to look at that and kind of go, well, how do we feel about that now? What would we do with that today? And would we call it a cult? We probably would. So I have a tough time defining it. Some people say religion and cult, the difference is religion is something that lasts a while. Some people also say, like Michael Shermer, what's he say? He said it's a religion has money. Has corporate sponsors. A cult doesn't. And so that's, and I don't want to define it that way. That's sort of what you hear. I think it's all the same. I really do. I think that it's about a person looking for an answer. If anything, the cult, just like the paranormal, what you're into, isn't it kind of the new religion?
Well, in the sense of, okay, so you were just saying about Jesus there. I'll get onto that. Obviously, Jesus was one of many, messiahs at the time, most probably, right?
Right.
you know. So yes, okay, so we look at Scientology. You know, Scientology is in a sense, I mean, not that I know much about it, right? But it's all obviously going towards the idea of becoming your own god with a lot of control and other issues there, right? Um, but yes, spirituality to me is the understanding that we're more than our body, and that yes, we are all an aspect of God, and that God is everything. Do you know what I mean? That there is nothing that God is not. But yes, it can become, as you were saying, they're a bit like that. Um, you know, there's many people in my field that people follow whatever. And no matter how wrong the information that comes out of their mouth and is proven wrong in the future, like David Wilcock or Corey Good or Kerry Cassidy, they they're almost like someone's very special to people. Do you know what I mean? And you can't say anything wrong. There's those people that will hang around with them no matter what they did wrong. Kind of like a few of the people in your book, right?
Yeah. Well, that was kind of, oh, well, that's how most of them make it, in doomsday cults. It's kind of that way. The sad thing is, in a lot of the ones I covered in the doomsday cults, even after all said and done, even after they're like David Koresh from Waco is long dead and gone, they still have believers, they still have followers. And a lot of the followers that, I've talked to, and even on some of the shows that called in, they're waiting for him to return. They're waiting for David Koresh to come back.
Absolutely. It's so crazy. Well,
So
well, look at the QAnon. Look at that nonsense.
it's it's not there is a point when the person, the soul, um, buys into their new cult leader or their new religious movement, and then there's a point where it goes beyond the leader and it becomes the teachings, and so the teachings carry on. So there's a point when that cult no longer is just a cult, it's really a religion. People start giving their faith to the teachings. So whoever is teaching it can pass on, can move on, or they can be replaced or killed or whatever the situation. But the bottom line is people have now bought into the teaching. Scientology is a perfect example. L. Ron Hubbard. Long after Mr. Science Fiction writer is dead, people are living, or they're creating, they're running society in their own little community as if he's going to come back. He's returning to Earth, but until he does, we're going to carry this on. It's
Yeah, yeah,
you know
absolutely. And you know, one name I'll mention, Alex Jones.
oh
Where does he fit in? Because he's on that fringe of conspiracy. Yet he, you know, even after being deplatformed, he's still got that cult following that have kept him going and continues to keep going. You know,
right.
and yeah, go ahead.
I was just, Alex Jones. I used to follow him on the radio, and and I know, and I used to actually I worked after him. Like when I'd go in, he would be finishing his show when he was, and he was a nutcase then. And he used to say things like, oh, what was some of them? He would say stuff like that they're spraying us with things in the air, and it goes into the water, and it's making our shrimp commit suicide. And I used to think, now, how does a shrimp commit suicide? Do they consciously jump on land? Like I used to make fun of him. But now all of a sudden, 6 million subscribers and he's like this Mr. Big Deal. And he's got the Donald Trump coming on his show. Holy cow, what's going on? Um, and I almost think that this whole well that politics is turned into a religion. Your followings of Donald Trump and even over there at Corbyn, all these people that they almost get a following that no matter what they do, they're totally in love with them. Is what they say and do is everything that there is to believe in, and I don't quite understand it, but
Well, can it be the opposite sometimes, where you disagree with someone, and so we class that group as a cult?
there is a point to that. But um, when when people start, this is where it's different. When people start doing things devoting their life, giving up their finances, giving up their friends and family, starting to change everything about themselves to follow this new movement, whatever it is. That is starting to become a cult rather than just a belief, rather than just something, yeah, like I believe in what this person says. Yeah, I believe in, like the Jim Jones. I believe in interracial marriage and having children and all the way he started, accepting all colors, all breeds, everything. Well, that's great. That's you can say, yeah, I believe that. Go for it. I'm supporting here. I'll give a donation. That's all great. But when I actually give up my job, give up my family, move in, go to Georgetown and work 12, 14 hours a day and eat rice and then kill myself. There's a point where you can support someone in everything, or even not support and say, no, I don't agree with you. I don't believe in that theory, and really dislike that person, but you're not killing them. Like there has to be kind of this middle ground. Um,
Yeah. Well, going back to Alex Jones, look, I don't agree with much what he says, but I'm in America as well, and we have the freedom of speech. We do in the UK and other parts of Europe, right, and many other
mhm.
countries, and I guess that's I wouldn't want to take that right from him, and I guess a lot of cults as well formed in the US over time because of that particular freedom, I guess.
Well, yeah, and that's it's. I think it's all good. It's just when you start interrupting in people's lives, you start destroying people's lives, that it becomes dangerous. And actually, in the book, I'm not really commenting. I'm not suggesting any actions toward anybody I talk about. It's more about. It's more about in this particular one. This is one of the books on cults, and this is just about doomsday. So every one of these have the same formula. They usually start out with something like we're giving yoga, meditation, some sort of holistic eating. They have some sort of very, very passive, very enjoyable entrance, to it. And then what it does is it starts to manipulate. It starts using people labor wise, sexual wise, financially, all these different things that they take over they break down their own self to become something different. And it's that, so it's, yeah, there's a freedom of speech, but there's also something that we have to protect, especially when children are involved.
Well, yeah, and we'll get into some of the stories where, well, a lot of your stories involve families, of course, and and children, and it's horrific what some of these families to go through, and yeah, and there is a sort of political philosophy that sort of curves itself through some of the cults as well, and doomsday cults.
Right, right. It's always about the it's an Armageddon. This is the end times. The leader of this group is going to be the leader. He was chosen, he or she, but mainly he has been chosen by God to lead you and then lead a new army into the new world after the Armageddon happens. And this is the person that's been chosen, and we have to follow this teaching and do whatever. And it's always that sort of formula that's going on here,
So,
right?
so just to clarify that, doomsday cults are apocalyptic and sort of rebirth. Then,
Exactly. This is the end times. We're living in it now. For whatever they all had a little variance in why it was ending and what was going to happen, but they were the ones chosen by God to lead a group of people to rebuild in the new world. And that's kind of the concept with all of them except for one that I put in there, and that was only because they were the vampire cults. Their actual following wasn't about Jesus or God or any of the Abrahamic gods. So it wasn't as they had a different idea between what was going to happen.
well, let's start with the first cult then, obviously, because I'm from this field, the UFO religion type cults, right? Which
Heavens.
yeah, Heaven's Gate, right? Where they was going to be picked up by the spacecraft Teller, and obviously that changed, and there was something terrible that happened, which I'll let you explain.
Well, and when you look at that again, when you look at the leader of the cult, there's always some sort of he had a real problem with being homosexual and having gay tendencies, and so with that, he wanted to remove his genitals. So he wanted to become asexual, and he sort of passed that on. But everything that he did was really centered on those feelings, you know, and that's really what threw him off into this. And when we're in this is a really important topic because in the current pandemic sort of idea, when we're on lockdown and we've got this virus going around, and remember the very first things that people were doing, they were running out and buying 40 bags of toilet paper, and there was all this mass thing, and everybody's going, what's going on? It's about control. It's about control. And even people that we consider to be normal, average citizens that are just doing their daily thing. They go to work and they clean their house, feed the kids, take the dog for a walk. They have this normal life, but all of a sudden something happens. As soon as you feel out of control, what's the first thing we do? We do things that we can actually manipulate. So we go out, we'll buy toilet paper, we'll buy all these things, and it's about gaining control. Now that's what's happening in cults. That's what it's about, getting control. And it's not about the little things. So when people say, well, how could they have all committed suicide, so to speak, drink the Kool-Aid and we're all going to die, it's because they were convinced of the new theory, and that gave them control. These were all people that felt. You have to look at the people that fall into these cults where they actually commit their lives to it, and they have elements that are missing. They're susceptible for reasons, and so a lot of the followers in these, like your Heaven's Gate, they have they need a feel of validation. They don't have that validation. They don't have an identity, and along comes a leader, which gives them that. It gives them a sense of purpose, and it gives them some place. And you have to be somewhat suggestible as well when someone's telling you these stories, when they, like with the Heaven's Gate and Hail Bob, and the whole idea in the spaceship, and we're going to transform into the new being, and we have to do this in order. And there has to be that low self-worth that allows us to be recruited into that. And it doesn't put me better. It's just, I think that we're all in that situation. We all feel that sometime in our life. So it's about happening at the same time, and coming across that. And I think that's where these people get caught up into this. And that's really the sad thing. And that's what's going on now. We're seeing it all over. The people protesting being on lockdown, in the States now, it's just crazy. You've got all these things going on, and I don't see them that different than the cults. And when you talk about the Heaven's Gate and the Comet and Marshall Applewhite, that whole thing, it's really not different. Some of the scenarios have changed, but it's the same action reaction that we have.
So just take us then to the last few hours of the Heaven's Gate cult and what became of them.
Well, I think with this, they were all talked into, and they all believed that they had to get on this UFO that was following the comet, and this spacecraft Tela would help them with the transformation into the new version of who they're going to be. And so they all killed themselves, or not all of them, but quite a few of them killed themselves, because that would be how they enter or graduate into the next level. And it was a process that they believed they were going to. And Applewhite just, that was it. You have to transform from physical, biological bodies into a spiritual change, and that was what he talked him into, this UFO. And it's really quite fascinating how he took a lot of science fiction too. He had a lot of Star Trek influence. The away team, and a lot of his talking came from pop fiction in a sense. It's not, Star Trek was not real, right? But I almost worry about a lot of people, and when they talk about these conspiracies and they talk about these cults, they're kind of intertwined now, and they believe in a lot of what they see on movies and television as fact.
I know. I heard another talk show host, Kerry Cassidy, the other day talking about AI Skynet, that it's real, and I'm like, wow, they're taking a lot of the movie stuff here right now and using it from popular fiction, and it's
And
like, why
where
would
does that
people
come
believe
from?
that?
And that worries me because, again, we all have our physical and mental issues. We come and go as we're all trying to get somewhere, and I understand that, but where that comes from, when you're watching television, you're watching a movie. Do you know, it's crazy when we're doing some of the Zodiac things on air with some of the people that were on different shows and stuff. People actually call in and believe, well, they caught the Zodiac. It was in that movie. I saw it, and you think, no, it's a movie. It's not fact. They're just making an entertaining suggestion. They're sort of thinking this is who it is. And it's like they really believed it. And that worries me more than the movie itself and about what really happened, because what are they doing? How are they functioning in society when they believe in a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, well,
And
again, your book is reaching a younger audience 'cause it's a more bit of a more modern book, but obviously with all the cases that younger people won't know of.
and I'm surprised when I was the very first time when it launched, and I was doing. I think I was on Coast to Coast, and they're asking about Jim Jones. I could not believe the people that didn't know who Jim Jones was, but they still use the term "drink the Kool-Aid." And I was just going to say, and it made me realize how fast things go. Each new generation comes up, and of course, they wouldn't be aware of something if you're born in 1980. It's Why would you? It would be, it fascinates me that everybody in school now, I mean, if school was back up and operating, would have not been alive during the 9/11. That's how fast it goes. And so you think back to your own age, think about when you were born and the events that were happening then, or even before, 10 years before. How would you know? Like, you didn't live it. So if you turn on a movie or a television show and that's kind of how they portray it, you might believe it. But that's kind of that actually puts more fear into me than anything else right now.
Well, hopefully books like yours help to, educate people as well as entertain as well. And just before we move on to Jim Jones and others, obviously one thing I wanted to say as well is that, not all cults are I would class absolutely, are murderous cults. Let's put it that way, right? Where you've got the self-help gurus. Let's just go to that just for a second, right? They're sort of more peaceful in a sense, right? But can
Right.
they be just as sociopathic and psychopathic?
Oh, for sure. And just to step back, when you say, well, not all cults are murderous, well, of course not. Not all psychopaths are murderers. Not all sociopaths are murderers, right? So that in itself, just because they do bad doesn't mean they're not a cult, or does not mean that there's not something a little bit more nefarious going on. It just means they're not killing. And when you get into self-help gurus, yeah, look at people like Bikram yoga, right? And there's all sorts of groups, and even the Japanese one we talk about, the AM Shinrikyo, Supreme Truth. That was the same thing. He started out as a yoga instructor and someone that would meditate and teach meditation, but they ended up doing sarin gas in the Tokyo subway, right? So this is not. It does start out innocent, and I do get backlash for saying that at times because I've said that in other shows, that a lot of these do start out as a fairly innocent, passive. It seems very helpful in what they're doing, and it's something people are doing all the time. It goes into something that turns awful, and I don't know, and I don't believe necessarily that even the leaders, that when they start these groups, are thinking in their mind, this is what I'm going to do. I don't think that's how it starts, but it does develop over years into something that's pretty terrifying.
Well, obviously you've covered murders, many murders, and do you ever think to yourself that they are brain damaged? There's something wrong with their brain that if the brain could be studied, would they see a difference in someone that's committed serial killings compared to a brain where someone's not lived that life?
I would think so. I would think something. It's far beyond what we can do now. I don't think the science can figure that out now. I don't think and another kind of a, I don't know what you bad thing is, a lot of these serial killers or people that do get caught, don't they don't get studied. They get studied from a psychological point of view, doctors, and it's always after the fact or from a distance. It's not like they take serial killers and put them in a room and then study them and for years until they pass on or cut their brain open and do all this. We just don't do that. So I don't know how far away it would be before we really figure out what causes these people.
It seems to be a lot of childhood issues as well. There's always obviously some people that I've interviewed that have committed murder. There's that disruptive, unbalanced, terrible bloody childhood that they've had. They've not had a normal childhood, most of them.
Well, that's there too, but then there's also ones like that, the Colonel Russell Williams that had a good life, but was a serial killer, and even look at Rodney Alcala, the game show dating game killer and stuff, right? I mean, he was an honor student. He was very good at what he did. He got jobs, photography, L.A. Times, perfectly good at what they do. They're and they didn't have a bad childhood at all.
I know, I've got to be careful when I say this because obviously, we still have to take no matter what's happened in our childhood, we have to take responsibility. Do you know what I mean? We've got,
Right.
we can steer our life in the direction nowadays. So yeah, but I've just, after from the few people who have committed murders that I've spoken to, some of them, the childhood, it was a bit disturbed. But like you say, not everyone, not everyone.
Not everyone. I
Yeah.
mean, not everyone, and it's not always how it seems. And why is it some people can take these challenges, be it in a terrible situation, terrible childhood, and come out of it and do well in life and live a fairly normal, productive, and even have develop a good love life in their throughout their time, and then someone else will take that happened to them and turn it into something that's ends up being really, really awful.
I mean, I want to get into your book, right? But I know I've just got a short amount of time with you, right? And it just goes too quickly. But obviously, the work that you do is almost like the study of the nature of evil in a sense. What is that dark side that comes out in people? And some of these people blame it that it's the voice in their head or whatever that spoke to them to, that they've got some inner demons. But I mean, it's that fine balance, isn't it? In a sense of balancing it between the light and the dark, if that makes
And
sense.
oh, and that for me, that came from paranormal. That come from that study and being part of that world, because people that believe that they're possessed, people that believe in a devil and some sort of religion, right, and demons and the possessed and all that sort of stuff, the exorcist. So you can follow that, but how much of it's in our head? And even when you get into UFOs and the reptilians and all these different, dogmen, you got all these different things going on. How much of it do we create with our own mind? That's the question I ask, and
Well,
so I do that with all of these.
and not only that, if the phenomena is real, which I would think that there is life out there, they haven't, it's not affecting our present moment right now too much, is it? We still got to get on with the crap. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, but it all comes down to us. It comes down to our mind. It comes down to what's around us. We create everything. We've created our financials. We created the countries. We created economic society. We've created all these things, and then we look for something different than what we've created. And I think that's sort of how I look at all of this, whether it's cults, whether it's murderers, whether it's paranormal, all of these things that we have around us. We want to structure it. We want to put names on it. We want to categorize it. And then we start creating these rules, which I don't agree with. I always question the rules.
Same here. I never liked the rules. I was born into it. But you know what I realized in the end? I've still got the freedom in this society, no matter how we think we're being controlled, to live the life I kind of want to live. So, the rules are there to protect us. I mean, imagine if the police state wasn't there, right?
Right. Oh, no,
God.
believe me, I'm all for the freedoms and the rights and everything that we have, and I think that it's the best direction, and the world overall is getting better, even though at times in our short little periods of life, sometimes we see bad things, and it affects us. Like what's going on now, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are very scared, and it has created a real dark cloud around the world. You know what I mean? So, and that affects everything around us and how we think and how we see things, and that's and see what's happening to us in general in the world right now is an excellent comparison to what's happening to smaller groups in these cults, like in the books, and how I talk about these groups. In a way, it's the same thing, just in a much smaller scale. What Jim Jones did with people, and the Heaven's Gate, and what Branch Davidians and the Solar Temple and all these, what they did was they created a safe place for some people that felt really out of control to get back into a safety and a control, and they could regulate their lives, and they felt good, even for a short period of time. It's the same sort of thing as
Same
what's
thing.
happening now.
Well, you look at all the conspiracy crap right now with the coronavirus and the 5G
Yeah.
and everything else. It's the same thing. It's the same cycle. Yeah.
It's the same thing in a larger scale, and people like Alex Jones, when you get people like that, the reason they're doing well is because
Fear sells.
people.
Fear sells.
It does, and they feel someone's in control, and it doesn't fit basic logic because, first of all, we can all make mistakes. So if Alex Jones comes out and says some sort of conspiracy, like the drink grape Kool-Aid, it makes you gay, or he has these ideas and he puts them out there, fair enough, he believes it. But when he starts creating things, and that's with anybody, when he starts saying, well, Sandy Hook never happened, they're actors, and that hurts people. I interviewed two of the parents. Do you know how hard that is to sit there with them, and they can hardly say two words, and yet you've got this guy going around saying that, and then you have people going to their houses and attacking them, calling them liars, thinking, well, come on. And so even when that's proven, that's what's the most disappointing thing, because you can prove something that can be brought out to public, but his followers will still go, yeah, no.
Well, don't show me the facts. Don't show me the evidence. My mind is already made up. Do you know what I mean?
And they're the ones that are watching that Zodiac movie telling me that they already know who did it. And that's that is what's scaring me about the whole thing, is the amount of people that are buying into things because of their feelings and not because of what we know to be true. Like, if I was to tell you something, I'm telling you, oh, this is, I'm getting into the QAnon or something. If I was to tell you something, some story, and then you believed it, and then all of a sudden it's proven wrong, or it's wrong. Oh, this is that. Why do you keep following me then? Do you know what I mean? Like that. Well, that's what I don't get. Sure, mistakes. There are people out there that have made mistakes. A doctor can come up with what you should take, or what they, and they make mistakes. They make wrong diagnoses. That happens. But when you actually create something, when you lie to someone knowing that you're lying and you've been
Yes.
caught, they're the
Yes.
ones we can't,
They're the
there's,
dangerous ones. They really are. Oh my
they're the
gosh.
ones.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, where do I lead on from that? Because it's so important what you're saying. I mean, it
Well,
really is just to wake up. But people, would maybe switch this off and say, I don't. This is just, I'm not ready to hear this. But that's fine as well.
but it's funny, the followers and the people that listen to me on our show, and there's a few of us, not just me, and I can't believe the people that write in and complain about us because of that. Because they'll, you work for the government, obviously. I don't know how many
God,
times I've
yeah,
been
CIA
accused
agent, yeah.
for for being on the take, and it's like I'm waiting for that paycheck
But
because
but
it's not.
isn't that the greatest thing to do? That kind of when people use that tactic all the time, right? To say you're disinformation agent, you're this or that, because you don't
Mhm.
agree with their narrative. But they, and they don't agree. Actually, most of these people don't agree with the system in the sense that if even if there's been a court trial, doesn't mean it's true. That
Right.
reality and all those people that attended that court trial, it never happened. I'm going to create a new one and follow me basically. Do you know what I mean?
Well, we haven't landed on the moon, right? I mean, Nexium, right? That whole magazine and that, and even talking to them or the flat earthers. Um, I give them all total time when I talk to them, and I let them, let's tell me what you believe, tell me what, and just some of it's just crazy.
Well, it's like this. When I do in my field, when I've had mediums on or psychics or astrologers, you know what? This one how I feel about it. If it empowers you like a life coach to just push you out of any slum that you're in without getting addicted to it, without and because we can get addicted to so many things, right? If it just helps you in a sense, in a way that nothing else could, just in that moment, that's good. It's like someone coming to clean your house up. Sometimes it's nice to have someone to clean it up, but you don't always want to take the responsibility and clean your own house. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, and I'm not against. I mean, there's things I promote, there's things I do, but it's got to be in balance. It has to
Yeah.
be in balance.
Well,
Um,
whatever gets you through your life. If it
yeah,
helps people, that's great. That's why a lot of holistic doctors or all of that stuff, I, you know, I used to be more open to things like that for myself years ago. Over the years, I've kind of become a little bit more skeptical of things like that. And, you got Mary with her, essential oils, and she's going to protect you against coronavirus, you know. you know and and I think, well, come on, there's a certain place. You know what, I kind of look at it as there's a death of expertise in society. We don't go to a doctor anymore. We're not looking to someone that's, if you've spent 4 or 5 years or 10 or 20 years learning a certain field, then their opinion is going to be more important than someone that doesn't, and that seems to be an offensive thing to say now. And I don't quite understand that, because it doesn't matter what field. It doesn't even have to be a doctor. If a person that's worked and done something for 20 years of their life, it's going to have a better opinion about that subject than me, who hasn't. I mean, I have feelings about things, but if I want to learn to play the piano, I'm going to see someone that plays the piano, right, rather than someone that tells me. And that's, and I, in the second book that's coming out about cults after this, I have problems with publishers because they keep sending it back because they get mad. And in the second book, I'm talking about self-help cults, and my whole entrance is about Oprah Winfrey. Love her to death, but why is she doing Weight Watchers? Why is she having a class? She's selling out. It costs you 120 American dollars to go see her for an 8-hour auditorium where they give you a bag of Weight Watchers chips and different things in the baggie. And she has a few people come up and talk to you. And the thing is, I don't understand. If I want to lose weight, I'm not going to go to Oprah Winfrey, because she's not done a very good job of it over her 60 plus years. and I hope you don't get hate mail. I know I get it for that. But I don't dislike her. I'm just saying that why not go to someone that's done something and been successful at it and get their help or opinion rather than someone that hasn't?
No, I get the point. Absolutely
You
get the
know,
point. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and this is, but we're in the day of Kim Kardashian has more followers than most cable networks.
Unfortunately, and I think that's one thing with the coronavirus, it's shown us we're all equal and we're all susceptible to this deadly virus. And, even though it's a small percentage, right, it's still, it does show us something about the goodness in man when we're all trying to help each other right now and
Hopefully,
and
hopefully it
help,
comes out.
help
Yeah.
our fellow man as well. So just look, well, obviously we've got another. I want to do a few interviews with you, and I'm kind of treating this as an introduction, which we won't be doing this again just like this. It's just been fascinating to pick your mind. But going to your book as well, obviously we've mentioned Jim Jones, and I think that's just very briefly just go over Jim Jones. Now we mentioned that tagline there, of course, drink the Kool-Aid, meaning a sort of blind devotion. Towards someone, but Jim Jones had over 900 people plus commit suicide. Just go to the very final few days of Jim Jones and that suicide, and I mean there were children that were killed, families and all sorts. So just tell us about what happened to that cult.
Well, with Jim Jones, he the reason he went to Guyana to start his Jonestown was because he had a lot of followers of his People's Temple in San Francisco that were starting to come out and report him for sexual assault and faking healings and all these things. So Guyana was a socialist country and it had no extradition with the U.S., so it was perfect for him. And so he went there, started Jonestown. He brought 1,000 followers, so they were all there and living their life. But what happened was some of those people didn't go. Some of them, like the mother would stay back in the States and the father would follow. And sometimes they took some kids. And so some of the mothers were actually complaining, saying they couldn't get their kids back because there was no extradition. And so that's where it started getting shaky. And so what happened was the San Mateo congressman, Leo Ryan, I believe, he actually took a team of journalists and some of his aides down there to check out Jonestown, see if people were being held and treated badly. And the first day went really well, but day two, some people slipped notes to him and some of the journalists, and they sort of approached Jim Jones and said, "What about these people? They're saying they're being held here and they don't want to stay here." And so that really upset Jim Jones. Now, Jim Jones was in a situation then when by then he was already really paranoid. He had a series of bodyguards he had hired. He was heavily on drugs at that time too. And so the combination was bad. He felt threatened. And so when the congressman and his team and some of the people that his followers that they were taking back went to the airstrip, some of the bodyguards came out, shot them. They figured they killed everyone, but they didn't. And then back at the compound, he decided it was time to commit the revolutionary suicide. Now, they were told to drink the Kool-Aid or the Flavor Aid. It was actually, couldn't even afford the real brand. And he, and cyanide laced. And he was told them, he told everybody it would be a comforting death and peaceful and that. And, but he made the mistake of telling the parents that. And a lot of them were giving it to their children first. And so when they saw their children were convulsing and foaming and going through this painful seizures, it scared a lot of them, and a lot of them wouldn't drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. So the truth behind that was he had his guards and people shoot them. So a lot of the bodies, when they first flew over the compound, they thought there was maybe 300 dead, and the reason was is because the children were dead first, and a lot of the parents were shot and forced to die, and so they were piled high, 2 or 3 bodies high, and so when they were flying over, the authorities at first they couldn't see all of that they were stacked up bodies. They just could just see from a distance. So I believe it was 912, or I can't remember now. There was quite over 900 that were found eventually. Um, we had 11 or 12 that actually escaped the terror, and they actually hiked 30 miles to the closest town through the jungle and survived. The sad thing is, too, when I interviewed, and there's one lady I interviewed that's still alive today, but man, by the time they made it back to the States, they were so shunned for being in Jonestown. That's the other bad thing. We treat people that get involved in these cults so badly. So she ended up living on the street and just doing drugs and had no life for years. And she had a child too, like at the time, I think 3 or 4 years old, that she carried out of the jungle. And it just ruined her life. Um, and I just look at how we treat them. We shun them. We don't want to help them. We don't want to support them. We just block them out like they don't exist, and they end up having just as bad or worse of a life outside of this cult. And what they were looking for to begin with was some sort of security and some sort of normalcy in life. So they join this group that gives them that, and it ends terribly like this. And so we just sort of don't help either. At the end of the day, the people that go on and survive they're not left with a good life. So that was one of the worst cult events that we've seen in our lifetime, for sure.
Absolutely. And there was the Myrtles as well. They actually left the group, but eventually they were murdered, and it was always thought that it was linked back to the Jones
Oh,
cult.
totally, totally. They started actually a group of they started a group for people that wanted to leave the cult. See, and people say, well, why don't you just leave? What happened was, like, just like the Myrtles were a perfect case. They actually moved. They sell their house, they quit their jobs, they up and they move, and they join the compound. They get into it, and so they no longer have any sort of means to get out. These cults take everything away, and they also, they get their followers to believe that what friends and family and coworkers and people that they had outside of that life are bad, and they need to get away from them. And then they get them totally isolated. Jonestown is a major totally. I mean, everybody that went down to Guyana into this Jonestown were completely isolated. Those 1,000 people didn't have passports, money, friends, nothing. They were in this camp 30 miles from the closest town through jungle. They worked, were fed rice, and at that point there was no way. How do you get out of something like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and they're sort of mind controlled as well. Do you know what I mean? Um, and financially stripped as well. You
There's
know,
just nothing left. You have
yeah,
nothing left. And what you go into, generally when a person goes in, the self, the person that they are, gets buried behind a whole new persona that they become. They become the new teachings, the new life. And you talk to cult specialists like Steve Hassan and stuff, that was part of the Moonies that came out, and now he has a lot of books and helps people get out. Um, when you talk to them, you realize how much, as he said, your real person, who you really are, is still there, and it just gets buried so deeply. And to try and help someone find themselves again is the hardest part. That's why getting someone that's believed in some sort of um, teachings from some group, it's tough to get them out of it because they're so far away from themselves.
absolutely. And I believe Jones had a sort of communist kind of discipline about him as well.
He he believed in that. And the thing is, that's what sold him at the beginning. When he was in Indiana, they adopted children from all around the world, and that caused him a lot of trouble. His wife, there were stores that wouldn't serve his wife because they had a black child. This is we're talking the 60s, we're talking the KKK, and we're talking this was the revolution of all that. But there was still a lot of strong pockets in the US that just shunned you. How could you do that? And so they went to California to get away, and they became very popular because he was, when you look at the old films, he was opening his arms, and he would be very, it didn't matter what race they were. It didn't matter if they were gay or straight. He just didn't care. He just embraced them, and he was not separated from them, and that really was what made him powerful. And that's before he kind of went nuts, so to speak. But so that attracted people. So all these different leaders and Jane Fonda and all these revolutionaries were all embracing him because he was doing exactly what they thought should have been done in life by doing that. Kind of like Princess Di back in the days. She would actually touch people, and you never do that as royalty. And she's touching a black child. Like, it was like a shock to some people, but it was the same. Yeah, it was the same thing. And you got in the 60s when you had the separation and you had that division so much, and then you had this family just adopting and taking you in. Come on, you're welcome in this church. We love you. And that was really embraced. And so he was at the beginning. So that communism, sort of socialism idea was being embraced.
Well, did he kill those adopted children as well? Were they killed in the final days, or?
No, actually, and his son was in. He was in another town in Guyana on the basketball team or something. They were at an event. So there was a group of 20 or 30 that were away from Jonestown when it happened, and his Jim Jones Jr., their black son, and they were all in a different place. So they were survivors. I believe 2 of his children died, and his wife was found shot as well, and just like Jim Jones was shot, and they say that he shot himself. There's also rumors that someone else shot him. It's a kind of a gray area, but they were found dead as well. So, but another thing is over 240 or so of them were actually they weren't able to identify them. So they were buried in a mass grave. We really don't know who they were. So it was pretty terrifying, especially back then, because something like that had never happened, and certainly not to that extent. And it was mind-blowing.
Well, that was absolutely. And I just think of. Did you cover? I don't think you did the Waco tragedy. Was that one that you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did cover
For
that.
sure.
Yeah.
And actually, and I talked to with that particular one, I 2 different members that are still Branch Davidians. They still believe in what they were taught, and they still live today what they the teachings, and they're waiting for him to come back. He's returning. He was the Messiah. He was Christ, and he will return to the earth, and they're waiting.
How many people died in that event?
So I'm trying to remember. I think it was 70, something in that area. It was nothing near to what Jim Jones was, but and that was mishandled by the U.S. so badly, and that's kind of that's led to a lot of conspiracies as well, right? That whole thing, the way it was handled was the whole reason of the Oklahoma City bombing. That was in response to it. So a lot of people felt that was, and in a way, when I believe it's Brian Thibodeau, one of the guys I talked to, he was in there with the whole group when the attack happened and it burned down and all those people died. He was one of the survivors, and when you hear how horrifying it was to be in there, and you couldn't get out, and when you hear about what was happened to them, you do realize that they did not do they did not handle that well at all. It shouldn't have never happened the way it did, and it's unfortunate. Such a terrifying end, you know.
One of the other cult leaders in your book is obviously Charles Manson. And just how does Charles Manson sort of fit in with the other doomsday cult leaders that you feature in your book as well?
Yeah, it was the same sort of mentality. He believed the world was ending. There was going to be the race war, the riots, and he believed he was man's son. He was God's son, and he was going to lead them into the new world, and he was going to help shape the new world. Um, Now, what I talk about in this book is there's another thing that happened um, when he got out of prison in the 60s, and he went to San Francisco. He lived right across from the Haight Ashbury Free Clinic, and that's where all of the poor people went, and all the people that were on drugs, and all of the people that were a lot of his girls that were getting different sexual STDs, and they could go there and get treatment. So, but in that same time, what they were doing there is they were experimenting with LSD. They were giving LSD to a lot of people that were alcoholics. They thought they had a good way of getting people off booze by giving them LSD. That was just part of the 60s. And so this is where they say he learned to use LSD in his favor. So a lot of the teens and a lot of the girls that he picked up to become part of his family, he would give them LSD, and he would tell them stories. And he learned that was a way of having a lot of influence and having them believe a lot of what he told them. He was also the guy that just like Jim Jones and a lot of the other leaders here, he would focus in on who he was talking to. He would make them feel that they were the only person in the world. So he had that strength about him as well, and it was a combination. So I kind of focus more on some of his dealings and how he was able to work his stories, work his magic to people, and have followings. And this was the Summer of Love. This is where the Church of Satan started in San Francisco. All these groups were huge back in that time, and were getting mass followings, and so there were so many teenage girls, and this was the hippie times. This is one of the girls that followed Manson that I talked to too. Like she said, her parents sold their house and quit their jobs, and they bought an old bread van, and they drove around place to place and crashed. And that's how her parents were living. She was 14. They told her to stay with Charlie. They liked him. And in fact, when Charlie got arrested stealing cars and had her there, the police took her and held her until the parents came and got her out of jail because she was 14. And what did they do? They just give her to Charlie right out of prison. And so that she got, this was the times. And I think that's had a big influence on things, and you have to. It's really important, I think, with a lot of the stories is you have to set the tone so people realize what was going on in that community at the time. It really helps to understand what happened.
Yes, and he was mainly attracted to younger girls, I think 14 to 16 as well.
Yeah, and I think he knew that was the best time to they were the most influential. A lot of them were homeless. They were just went to San Francisco, and they were live free, do pot, and like I said, and there's conspiracies that say that the government taught Charles Manson how to use LSD as a drug of influence. I don't necessarily believe those conspiracies. And just so people know, I'm not necessarily on that bandwagon, but he definitely did use LSD, and he definitely learned how influential it was. Because even Tex Watson, who hated him, who ended up being one of his best supportive friends in a lot of the killings, and he was very involved. Um, when they first were together, couldn't stand each other. Charles, and even Tex Watson, who's alive, said that Charles Manson was able to bring him to parties and give him LSD, and within a couple of trips, he loved Charlie. So he definitely knew how to use it to his advantage.
And some of those followers, remained loyal, up to the very end, up to his death.
There, and there's still people that believe in his teachings as well. We still have people out there. Even when he died, how many did he have on Facebook? Like 80,000 followers on his Facebook page. So we're
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it's it really is a case that will continue to be studied.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Now, just very finally, final few questions. What out of the remaining, obviously, cults that you've studied, what was one of the sort of ones that you might like to discuss as a sort of final one that was you think's interesting?
I think probably out of the ones that we haven't talked about, maybe the vampire cult. That was interesting because this is where he believed he was an old spirit 400 or 500 years ago. So they don't really, the vampire cult, because they didn't follow any particular religion. And kind of the most unusual thing is when you get into something like this, again, they were so influenced with Anne Rice and and the vampire culture that's created by people that are writers. It's fiction, but they make it their lifestyle. And he believed in the characters, and he looked for other people to follow him, and he found them. And so they had rituals, and everything they did was like watching Interview with the Vampire. It's like watching a movie. They get so intertwined with what they see, and they buy it. They believe it. And that's again one of the most frightening things about cults, and watching the developments and watching what happens and how they get into these things, and it's just totally unexplainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your book is available from obviously all good bookstores and especially online as well. When we are open, right? It just seems like it's Amazon just right now, but we'll link your book in the description. Now, for the podcast, your website is.
Oh, it's just houseofmysteryradio.com, and for myself, it's alanrwarren.com.
Okay, well, your website's been coming up on the screen throughout this interview as well. And I just want to say, Alan, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.